Hello, listeners. Welcome to Homegrown KC special Patreon episode. Homegrown KC is a podcast dedicated to exploring Kansas City's fascinating history and sharing stories from its rich past. Today, I'm joined by fellow historian Becky Ray. Welcome to the show, Becky.
Glad to be here.
So, before we get started, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Oh, okay. Well, I am a paranormal researcher and investigator, and I moved to Kansas City in the late 90s and immediately, because I was already into the paranormal, started finding all these wonderful things out about Kansas City and just couldn't wait to dive into it. Um, so I've just kind of been fascinated with everything about the city since then.
Well, how did you first get into paranormal investigation?
It's kind of funny because I was doing it before I knew I was doing it. I grew up being one of those kids that as soon as somebody would say, well, you know that place is haunted, I was always chomping at the bit to get in there and find out, okay, come on, ghosts. I want to see how this place is haunted. Tell me the stories about it. And I just started going to all these awesome places. And when people would ask me about what things were going on, I realized I was trying to keep it all straight in my mind. And I was getting a bit confused, so I started writing things down and keeping notes and taking photos and logging it all. And I was doing that before I knew that other people were doing that.
So, how do you investigate a haunted house then? What's your process like?
Well, my process is I generally try to start with what people are currently saying is going on. And then I work backwards from there. I try to always find out all of the history of the location as far back as I can go. And just because it's a house now doesn't mean that location has always been a house. It could have been a lot of other things before the house was built.
Right.
And even other buildings. It could have been fields. They could have been lots of things. And here in America, it could have definitely been a civilization of Native Americans before we took over. So there's just a lot to look into. And then I try to see if I can find a historical event that matches up with what people are reporting experiencing. Like if someone says they see a woman with blonde hair going up the stairs, I try to find out, was a woman with blonde hair ever living there or working there, or spending a lot of time there, and see if I can work backwards from that.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, you just had a book come out, right?
Yes, I did. Very excited.
You described it on your website as part history, part paranormal, part
true crime.
True crime. That's it. Thank you. And I usually like to read the book before I talk to the author. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to do that.
Oh, that's okay. It just came out, so
it sounds really cool. I'm going to have to see if the library has a copy.
Mid-Continent will. I know that much.
Okay, cool. So tell us a bit about your book.
Well, about 20 years ago, I thought, there's not a comprehensive book of Kansas City hauntings. There's a few books that are out there that just have little short blurbs just about the current activity, but they don't really go into the history of the location. And that's kind of what I like to know. And so I started working on it, and then, life happens, and I would work on it for a while and have to set it aside, then work on it for a while and kind of set it aside. And this year being what it is, I actually got it finished. So it starts off, I go into some of the history of Kansas City, how Kansas City was founded, why Kansas City is where it is. And then I go from there to a lot of the true crime things that have happened in Kansas City throughout the years that have possibly led up to a lot of the haunting activity. And then the last part is where I go into the haunted locations.
Okay. So what was the most surprising thing that you learned in your research?
How many people die at hotels? A lot of people die at hotels, and that just really, I guess it makes sense. I just had never thought about it, but people die at hotels all the time, and that had never crossed my mind. And now every time I go into a hotel, that's all I think about.
Yeah, I guess I haven't thought about it much either, but the horror movies always seem to take place at a hotel.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising.
Definitely makes sense.
Well, do you have some spooky stories you can share with us?
Oh boy. Okay. Let's see. Trying to think of one from my personal experiences. Okay. One place that my team has investigated several times is the 1859 jail and Marshall's Home Museum in Independence, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And that place has kind of really got a lot of history to it that goes back quite a ways. But the main thing is, obviously, it was built in 1859. It was replacing the old jail, which was next door that had gotten too small. And a lot of people were kept in there. The cells are pretty small. They weren't made for multiple people, but there were many times throughout history that multiple people were kept in them. It was an active jail during the Civil War. Skirmishes took place there with people coming to free their buddies during the Civil War. People were killed inside the jail. One of the marshals was killed up in his bedroom during an they were breaking in to break their guy out. And they were trying to get the keys from the marshal, and then they shot the marshal up there.
Oh, okay.
And during our investigations, we've had children's voices, and some people were thinking for a while that maybe there were lots of children in the jail, but what's more likely is that the marshal's family lived there. That was the marshal's home, and there were
All right, yeah, that was fun. I have no idea what that was. You were telling us about the jail.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly where I was at. I think I was talking about how that through the years there had been jailbreaks and people breaking in trying to free people, especially during the Civil War. And at one point there had been some gentlemen who came and went into the marshal's home part, which is next door to the jail, and were trying to get the keys to the cells from the marshal to free their buddy, and ended up killing the marshal in the process. And they also, one of the gunshots wounded his son, shot him in the arm. The son lived, but obviously was very traumatized by that. And they think one of the ghosts there is that marshal that's still in the marshal's home, maybe trying to keep doing his job, or just looking over the bedroom, or it could just be residual because what happened was so traumatic there. But one of the most interesting things that has happened to my team while we've been investigating is in the cells part. We were people have always talked about the most haunted cell, and everybody I talk to tells me it's a different cell. And I find that amusing because every time we go, it seems to be a different cell that has the most activity in it. There isn't one particular one that's always the most active. And on this particular investigation, we had been sitting inside the cell that had been the most active before, and nothing was going on. And we'd gotten to the point where we were kind of being silly and goofy, and we said, okay, maybe we should try a different cell. And we just walked across the hallway and into the cell across the hall, and immediately our moods completely changed. We went from just kind of being goofy to a couple people started to feel sick. All of us started to feel really depressed. And shortly after that, we saw what looked like a shadow out in the hallway. And as I had my video camera going, but I took my regular camera out to take some pictures. And nothing showed up in the photos. But later, when I was reviewing the video, right after I took one of the photos, there's another flash out in the hallway that's a weird shape. It kind of looks like, I thought it looked like a playing card. Some other people think it looks like maybe the lock to a door. But that it was in 2004 when I got that video. And to this day, we've not been able to figure out what caused that. It was very strange. And considering how we were feeling at the time, it was really what was going on at that moment. It's a very, very cool museum.
Yeah, it's on my list to visit. But I didn't know that it was haunted actually until now. So I was going to ask, what equipment do you use when you're on your investigations?
That's always a question people want to know. On the TV shows, they use lots and lots and lots of gadgets. And I have lots and lots and lots of gadgets. I've got 2 gigantic rolling toolboxes full of gadgets that I don't use anymore. I've kind of come full circle. I went from using lots of things to just now using cameras and audio recorders and my eyes. Because I realized from watching some of the shows, what was happening was when their REM pods or EMF meters would start flickering, they focus in on that device rather than paying attention to what's going on in the room, which is what they should have been doing. Because if it's flickering, that means something in the room changed. And they need to look around and try to figure out what changed in the room that made that happen. Instead of talking to a blinking device. You're missing probably, it's like, I always give the example. It's like if somebody came to your front door and rang the doorbell, do you go stand by the box that made the sound, or do you go answer the door? Well, you go answer the door. But if you're looking at the blinking lights, you're looking at the device that made the ring, not the door. So when that happens, you need to stop and look around the room. And so I've kind of gone back to the less equipment, more paying attention to what's happening. And then
That's a really good analogy.
Yeah. And I keep the video cameras rolling just in case something happens. And I'm not against that stuff. I think that stuff can be great, but it needs to be used properly and not just looked at like, oh, well, that blinked, we have a ghost, because something else could have caused that to blink too.
Okay. So during all of your investigations, how many ghosts or ghostly encounters would you say you've had?
Not as many as I'd like. I always say this, and it's so true, is we can't make them perform on command. So there are times that we go to a location and nothing happens, and we could go back like a week later and it's just jumping with activity. Or there have been times that I have gone almost an entire year where I keep going to places and nothing happens, and nothing happens, and nothing happens. And I'm almost to that point of, what's going on? Did I make it all up in my head? When we finally go to a location and something happens, where it all comes back to me, I'm like, yes, this is why I do this. So, I know some people get disappointed because they want to go and have something happen, but you just can't promise that. There's places that normally we get a lot of EVPs and things, and there are nights I've been there when it's just flat. There's nothing happening. So there's no guarantees. It's hit and miss, and it's a lot of luck.
So how often would you say you visit the same site?
I like to go back as many times as possible. It's not always possible. Sometimes the owners only want you in there a few times, or some places we have to pay because, it's a rental. They've got to pay someone to be there with us, so we've got to pay their people. And it just gets a little too expensive to go as many times as I'd like. But I am all about going as many times as possible. Because if we do get something that happens, I want to go back to see, can we recreate that? Can we make that happen again? Either as we figure out what it was, that it was something natural that we just misinterpreted, or is there something paranormal happening and we can, maybe figure out what we did that triggered it.
Yeah. Well, do you have some other stories you can share with us?
Oh, let me think here. I'm sure I do. I'm just trying to think of personal ones rather than ones.
But when I put you on the spot, it just
right? I should be more prepared. Well, the Glore Psychiatric Museum is up in St. Joseph.
I
included that in my book because it's a day trip. It's close enough. That's a place I've been to quite a few times, and we've had some very strange things happen there. But my very first investigation with my team there is probably the most exciting thing we had happen. This was, I'd say, maybe 2004, 2005-ish. And things were organized a little differently than they are now. If you go now, things are in a different location. At that time, they had more displays up on the third floor, and we were kind of standing in the middle there. And something I'll do on investigations is I'll just say, if somebody can hear us, would you make a knocking sound? And normally there's nothing. But on this particular occasion, I said, if somebody can hear us, can you make a knocking sound? And we all heard a knocking sound. And so I was like, well, if you can hear me, could you knock 3 times? And it knocked 3 times. And so then we kind of keep trying to keep this knocking sound going and to follow where it's coming from. And we find this locked door. And that seemed to be where it was coming from. But once we got to the door, it stopped. So I'm thinking immediately, okay, that was just a coincidence. There's no way that this was something paranormal leading us to this door. And one of my team members leans up and he puts his ear to the door, and then he kind of steps back and he said, I swear I heard a voice in that room. And so then we all kind of put our ears up against the door, and a few people heard this voice as well and said, there's a voice in that room. And I'm a believer, but I'm also a skeptic in that I want to find out what's real, what's not. And I want, I don't have a closed mind of what's in there. I'm not going to jump to ghost. I'm not going to jump to not ghost. But I'm thinking this is an audio illusion. I bet the HVAC unit's in there and it's making a humming sound. It kind of sounds like a voice when it comes through the door. So we went and we got the museum representative who was there and asked her, could she open that door for us? So she got her key out, and I was kind of telling her what was going on, and she kind of got this look on her face like, oh, you're going to be surprised. And I'm thinking, okay, is that good? Is that bad? Is that the HVAC? And she opened the door, and it was an empty room. The only thing in there was a desk that hadn't been used in a while. And there was nothing on the desk, and there was nothing in there making any noises. So I was kind of like, well, I guess that's not the HVAC. But the knocking and the voices and everything stopped after we unlocked that door. And every time I've gone back, I've kind of checked on it, and it's not there. So I always joke around that whatever was in there, we let it out. But that was kind of exciting that knocking sound responded, because that's never happened anywhere else.
Not even, you said that was 2005, so not even in the years since have you had that?
Nope. I've been back there, and there's always activity there. Well, not always, but almost always activity. There's a very active location. But that knocking has never happened again, and we've never heard voices through that door again.
It's kind of spooky.
Yeah, it is. It's a spooky place. It's the psychiatric museum now, but it was part of the psychiatric hospital, and the two buildings that the St. Joseph Museums are in were the old surgery buildings. So that's where the lobotomies and things would have been performed. So,
yeah, visiting that museum is also on my list.
Yes, that's very worthwhile. I definitely recommend that one.
So, how many places in Kansas City have you investigated?
A lot.
Like a round number.
A round number? Oh, 30? Maybe?
Okay.
I didn't include them all in the book. There are several places I didn't include. And the reason I didn't include them was I hadn't gathered enough information on them yet. But I did include a lot of places. Most of them were places I've been and done investigations.
Yeah, I'm guessing you haven't been able to do as many this year because of coronavirus?
Yeah, I've stuck to things that I was committed to before Corona happened,
right?
Before the COVID. But I'm trying not to schedule anything just because I want to play it safe, but at the same time, I really miss it. So it's difficult. It's kind of a fine line. And one day I'll be like, no more until this is done. And the next time I'm like, well, maybe one little one.
Oh, I understand that perfectly. I do the same thing.
So it's tough. It's a very tough call, but got to do what's safe. Got to do what's the right thing.
Right. So, reminder for our listeners: be safe. Wear your mask.
Yes. Stay 6 to 10 feet away from each other.
So, do you have other projects that you're working on?
Well, I thought about. I used to do, but back before they were called podcasts, I did an internet radio show with a friend of mine back around 2006, and I've been thinking about getting back into that and doing a podcast again. So that's a project I haven't started yet, and I have some thoughts in my mind about what I want my next book to be about. So while I'm in this downtime-ish, because it's not completely downtime, but downtime-ish, maybe I should get started on the next one so that it'll be done in 20 years.
Well, if you did a podcast, would it be on haunted places in Kansas City or on something else?
It would be haunted places and true crime.
Okay.
Yeah, and probably I would start it with Kansas City and focus here until I ran out of stories.
Oh, okay. That's kind of what I'm doing. I decided I would focus on KCMO, and then eventually I want to branch out to the other cities around us.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. Some good history in this area.
So, do you want to talk about your next book, or do you want to wait on that?
I haven't chosen exactly which topic yet. We thought it was an urban legend when I was in college. I grew up in Oklahoma, and I went to college at Southwestern Oklahoma State University. And right by, it's in the city of Weatherford, and right by there is a place called Dead Woman's Crossing, which there's no way that's real, right? There's no way there's an actual dead woman, but that was the ghost story that everybody told, was about this woman who had been beheaded and left dead there by the bridge. And we would go out there, and people would say, oh, cold spots. Some people would say, oh, weird things happen here. I did some research, because that's what I do, and it's a 100% true story. A woman was kidnapped and murdered there, and they stole her baby, and no one knows what happened to the... they did find the baby eventually, yeah. But no one knows who did it for sure. There's a woman they think did it, but then she poisoned herself, and it's a very convoluted crime story that I've
Yeah,
been
sounds like it.
fascinated with since I found out it was real. And that might be what my next one's about, because I know people have included it in chapters in books about Oklahoma history, but I don't think anyone's done a complete book just on that subject. So that's probably where I'm going next.
Okay. Sounds cool.
Yep.
So, you mentioned once or twice now that your current book,
Uh-huh.
which can you give us the title of that? I don't think it's been mentioned yet.
Oh, sure thing. Well, it's got Kansas City Hauntings is the main title for it. And then the subtitle is History and Mystery of the Paris of the Plains.
Okay. Oh, I like that, history and mystery.
Yep.
Well, so it's been mentioned a couple of times that you include true crime in there. So,
Yes.
what sort of true crime stories did you include?
Well, I went back a ways to some of the things that happened when Kansas City was being established. But then, of course, more recently, I get into all of the serial killers Kansas City has had, that a lot of people aren't aware of just how many serial killers Kansas City has had. So,
Yeah, I don't think I've come across any serial killers in my research yet. Not that I've researched everything; I have a lot left to learn, but
yeah,
that's new information for me. So,
yeah, we've had quite a few. I think more than even I realized when I got into it. It's like, okay, well, here's this one, and here's another one. Oh, wow. I just unlocked. Wow. So, yeah, we've had our share of serial killers for sure.
are there any names that we would like readily recognize, but we didn't know he was Kansas City?
Maybe Bob Burdella. He was in the 80s. Here's what I think. This is going to sound terrible when I say this. Here's what I think happened with Bob Burdella was his crimes were discovered, and people were just starting to talk about how horrible they were when Dahmer was arrested. And I think Dahmer overshadowed him. So he kind of got lost there in the Dahmer shadow. Another name people might know is John Robinson, who was also known as the Slave Master. He was the internet's first serial killer, and he was here in Kansas City on both sides of the state line.
Oh, that's creepy.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, true crime is generally not my thing, but I think I'm gonna have to check out some of these guys.
Yeah, that's another thing that I don't remember when I first got into it. I was a kid, and then I remember the Helter Skelter miniseries being on TV in the early 70s, and that kind of was like, what? And then when I was 10, like I said, I grew up in Oklahoma. The Girl Scout murders happened in Oklahoma, and I just kind of, since then, I've just kept my eye on true crime stuff. Just, I don't know. I feel like I'm more prepared because I know about it. If a serial killer comes after me, I know what to do now because I know about things. But actually, no, I don't. But I just feel more prepared that way.
No, you probably are. You'd be like, "Oh, I know what you are. Okay, I'm gonna walk away now."
I'm ready for you. I got my stun gun.
So, anything else that you want to tell us about in your work?
Um, I am also a tour guide for American Hauntings, which is the same company that helped put out my book. And we do events all around the country, and I'm the representative here in Kansas City, and I do things around Missouri and up into Iowa and in Kansas, and I set things up. So when things get settled down, and we have some smaller events going on now, check that out too. It's at bumpinthenight.net, and there are events listed there where people who aren't necessarily paranormal investigators, although paranormal investigators are absolutely welcome, can get into some of these locations they wouldn't be otherwise able to get into.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a lot of fun.
Sounds like you have just had a lot of different stuff that you've gotten into over the years.
Definitely. Definitely. My interest in the paranormal started with UFOs, and so people make fun of UFO people, but in my background, that was my first. I grew up with all these things on TV, like In Search of, so the UFOs, the Bermuda Triangle, and Bigfoot. So I don't, when people make fun of it, I'm like, hey, those are my roots. But yeah, I've done a lot of different things, but the paranormal has always kind of just been there. That's been my one constant.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout my life is my interest in ghosts.
So you said that you've not had as many encounters as you would like.
Right.
What was your first encounter?
My first encounter would have been when I was either 14 or 15. I don't remember exactly which I was, but I was one of those two ages, and I was helping out. Our local community theater was located in a haunted building, and
Of course.
of course it was. And I was there, and I had, people kept telling the stories about it. But, I was in there almost every day helping set up this haunted house. And I hadn't seen anything or had anything happen, and I was feeling really bummed about that because, I'm in a haunted location every day and nothing's happening. But one of the stories people talked about was weird things happening down in the basement. And we were setting some things up in the stage area, and I was asked to run down to the basement to get some things. So I think it was nails or something. I don't remember exactly what it was. And so I trotted up and went down. The basement was the kind that had the door was flush with the floor. It's a big, heavy wooden door you had to lift and lay open to get to the staircase. Yeah. So when it's closed, you don't even see the door. But we had it open, and I went down the stairs into the basement and got whatever it was I'd gone down there to get. And as I was starting up the stairs, the basement door, this big, heavy wooden door, slammed shut. And I thought, ha ha, guys, very funny. But then when I was trying to raise it to get up out of the basement, that thing weighed a ton. And it took me forever to get that thing up. And by the time I got back to where the other people who were waiting on me holding this wall, they were like, what took you so long? I was like, because you guys slammed the door shut on me. And they were like, we've been standing here waiting on you this whole time. And I realized, okay, I asked for it. I got it. That was my first experience.
Okay.
But I'm not psychic at all or anything like that. They don't talk to me. I just put myself.
Oh yeah, 'cause that's a totally another part of the paranormal investigation is all the mediums.
Yeah. I try not to rely on that too much. I don't mind them, and actually they could be handy to have them there for afterwards. But when I'm doing the actual investigation, I want to stick to actual solid things. Yeah, and I don't have any of that myself. So normally, if I have an experience like that, it was just pure luck. And I tend to put myself though in locations where things happen a lot, and so I think that's why I have had some things happen. Is just the amount of time I've spent in locations where paranormal activity has been known to happen.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I really had any other questions in mind.
Okay. I can't think of anything else either.
All right. Well, in that case, if someone is interested in getting in touch with you or following your work, where can they do that?
They can find me on my website, which is ghostsagogo.com, GHOSTSAGOGO.com. And it's also my Facebook page is Ghosts a Go-Go. So.
Okay. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you. I look forward to reading your book, and then maybe we can talk more after that sometime.
That sounds great. I've had a lot of fun.
Thanks again to Becky for joining me. Thanks also goes to the Dear Misses for the use of their song Kansas City as the intro and outro music of the show, and to my sister-in-law for creating the logo.
Seem to shake this feeling, and I can't seem to